Good morning, everyone. Today we're looking at the second I am saying of Jesus, and it's found in John chapter 8. And it's where Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever believes in me will never walk in darkness again. And I love how visual that is, just the image of light and darkness. Now, in your week study, you will read a lot more about the time and the context and the festival that was being celebrated as Jesus said these words. And I'll just briefly tell you, and then you can study it more in depth this week, that they celebrated, what they were celebrating when Jesus said that he is the light of the world, is the illumination ceremony. And this was part of the week-long festival called the Festival of Booths. Now, if you remember, that it was also in John chapter 7, in the water pouring ceremony, where Jesus said, if anyone is thirsty, let them come to me and drink. And whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them. So here in John chapter 8, it's the evening of that same day where the water pouring ceremony happens. And Jesus is saying to them, I am the light of the world. And what this celebrated, the illumination ceremony, was to celebrate and commemorate the pillar of fire by night that was covering Israel as they left Egypt, and the pillar of cloud by day. Now these supernatural occurrences, the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, was a constant theophany. It was an image of God with them constantly with the Israelites as they were wandering through the wilderness. And the wonderful thing about the cloud and the fire is that not only did it protect them, it also guided them. And if you read in Genesis and Exodus and how the cloud moves and the pillar of fire and the cloud moves, Israel had to move whenever it moved. So if it was the middle of the night and the pillar started moving, everyone packed up and they started moving. And that's how God guided them through the wilderness, and that's how God protected them. And it also provided light for them in dark nights. How amazing is that? You see, but I don't want to really focus on the illumination ceremony itself. I'll let you study that for yourself this week. What I really want to focus on is John chapter 8 verses 1 to 12. That's in between the water pouring ceremony and the illumination ceremony. We find this woman in the book of John who was brought before Jesus, who was caught in the act of adultery. And the Pharisees dragged her. I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know exactly if they literally caught her in the act or leaving the act. But however your imagination wants to play that out, they brought her caught guilty and in sin. And there's no doubt that she was a sinner and that she was guilty of what she had been caught in. And they dragged her out and they brought her before Jesus. And according to their laws, she had to be stoned to death because she was caught out. That is harsh. That is a very, very harsh judgment. And these Pharisees, who are, the law keepers, the religious leaders, the pastors, if you will, the shepherds, who are supposed to be there for the flock and to guard them and guide them and protect them and almost be like that theophany of the cloud and the fire. These men that were supposed to guard, protect and guide dragged and accused and condemned her before Jesus. Luckily they brought her to Jesus, because Jesus looks at her with grace and with mercy. And he turns around and he starts writing something in the ground. And I would love to know what Jesus wrote in the ground. But as Jesus was writing in the ground, the woman's accusers started turning around and walking away one by one. First the oldest men and then the younger men. started leaving. And when Jesus looked up, they were all gone. And he turns to the woman and he says, "Where are your accusers now? Does no one condemn you?" And she says, "No one, Lord." And then he says, "Neither do I condemn you. Now go and sin no more." And straight after this happened, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever walks with me, whoever believes in me, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness again, like the Israelites in the wilderness." Jesus' word and his truth will guard us and guide us. And this especially for people caught in sin. Like this woman was caught literally almost with her pants down, and in the greatest shame and in the greatest guilt. And we must be like Jesus' representation to hurting sinful people in this world. When someone is obviously caught out in their sin, do we turn on them like the Pharisees and drag them out and condemn them and judge them? Or do we bring them to Jesus so that they can receive mercy and grace and forgiveness and a covering from their shame? In the same chapter, and that's also something that you'll look at in your study this week, Jesus says to them, "If the Son sets you free, you are free indeed." So if you have been caught out in your sin and the Son sets you free, then you are free indeed. So I pray for us that we would be like those people that bring people to Jesus so that he can deal with their sin. And there's the bell. Until next time. Bye.